This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Today's reading by Tom Hackett, djhackett.newgrounds.com. Year of the Big Thaw by Marion Zimmer Bradley. You say that Matthew is your own son, Mr. Emmett.
Yes, Reverend Doane, and a better boy never stepped, if I do say it as shouldn't. I've trusted him to drive team for me since he was 11, and you can't say more than that for a farm boy. Way back when he was a little shaver so high, when the war came on, he was boundin' he was gonna sail with this Admiral Farragut. You know boys that age, like runaway colts. I couldn't see no good in his being cabin boy on some tarnation Navy ship, and I told him so. If he'd wanted to sail out on a whaling ship, I allow I'd have let him go. But Marthy, that's the boy's ma, took on so that Matt stayed home. Yes, he's a good boy and a good son. We'll miss him a powerful lot if he gets this scholarship thing, but I allow it'll be good for the boy to get some learning besides what he gets in the school here. It's right kind of you, Reverend, to look over this application thing for me.
Well, if he is your own son, Mr. Emmett, why did you write birthplace unknown on the line here?
Reverend Doane, I'm glad you asked me that question. I've been turning it over in my mind, and I've just about come to the conclusion it wouldn't be nohow fair to hold it back. I didn't lie when I said Matt was my son, because he's been a good son to me and Marthy. But I'm not his pa, and Marthy ain't his ma, so could be I stretched the truth just a mite. Reverend Doane, it's a tarnal funny yarn, but I'll walk into the meeting house and swear to it on a stack of Bibles as thick as a cord of wood. You know I've been farming the old corning place these past 7 year. It's good flat Connecticut bottomland, but it isn't like our land up in Hampshire where I was born and raised. My pa called it the Hampshire Grants. I know that was King's land when his pa came in there and started farming at the foot of Scuttock Mountain. That's Injun for fires, folks say, because the Injuns used to build fires up there in the spring for some of their heathen doodads. Anyhow, up there in the mountains we see a tarnal power of queer things. You call to mind the year we had the big thaw, about 12 years before the war? You mind the blizzard that year? I heard tell it spread down most of York, and at Fort Orange, the place they call Albany now, the Hudson froze right over, so they say. But those York folks do a sight of exaggerating, I'm told. Anyhow, when the ice went out, there was an almighty good thaw all over. When the snow run off Scuttock Mountain, there was a good-sized hunk of farmland in our valley went under water. The crick on my farm flowed over the bank, and there was a foot of water in the cowshed, and down in the swimming hole in the back pasture wasn't nothing but a big gully 50 foot and more across, rushing through the pasture, deep as a lake and brown as the old cow. You know freshet floods? Full up with sticks and stones and old dead trees, and some of his old shed floating down the middle. And I swear to goodness, Parson, that stream was running along so fast I saw 4-inch cobblestones floating and bumping along. I tied the cow and the calf and Kate. She was our white mare, you mind. She went lame last year, and I had to shoot her, but she was just a young mare then, and skittish as all get out. She was a good little mare. Anyhow, I tied the whole kit and caboodle of 'em in the woodshed up behind the house where they'd be dry, then I started to get the milk pail. Right then I heard the gosh awfulest screech I ever heard in my life. Sounded like thunder and a freshet and a forest fire all at once. I dropped the milk pails. I heard Marthy scream inside the house, and I run outside. Marthy was already there in the yard, and she points up in the sky and yelled, "Look up yonder!" We stood looking up at the sky over Shattuck Mountain, where there was a great big shoot now, I don't know as I can call its name, but it was like a trail of fire in the sky. It was making the dangdest racket you ever heard, Reverend. Looked kind of like one of them 4th of July skyrockets, but it was big as a house. Marthy was screaming, and she grabbed me and hollered, "Hez, what in tunket is it?" And when Martha cusses like that, Reverend, she don't know what she's saying, she's so scared. I was plumb scared myself. I heard Liza, that's our young'un, Liza Grace, that got married to the Taylor boy. I heard her crying on the stoop, and she came flying out with her penny all black and hollered to Martha that the pea soup was burning. Marthy let out another screech and ran for the house. That's a woman for you. So I quietened Liza down some, and I went in and told Marthy it weren't no more than one of them shooting stars, and I went and did the milking. But you know, while we were sitting down to supper, there came the most awful grinding, screeching, pounding crash I ever heard. Sounded as if it were in the back pasture, but the house shook as if something had hit it. Marthy jumped a mile, and I never saw such a look on her face. "Hez, what was that?" she asked. "Shoot, now, nothing but the freshet," I told her. But she kept on about it. "You reckon that shooting star fell in our back pasture, Hez?" "Well, now, I don't allow it did nothing like that," I told her, but she was jittery as an old hen, and it weren't like her nohow. She said it sounded like trouble, and I finally quietened her down by saying I'd saddle Kate up and go have a look. Kind of thought, though I didn't tell Marthy, that somebody's house had floated away in the freshet and run aground in our back pasture. So I saddled up Kate and told Marthy to get some hot rum ready in case there was some poor soul run aground back there, and I rode Kate back to the back pasture. It was mostly uphill because the top of the pasture is on high ground, and it sloped down to the crick on the other side of the rise. Well, I reached the top of the hill and looked down. The crick were a regular river now, rushing along like Niagara. On the other side of it was a stand of timber, then the slope of Shattuck Mountain, and I saw right away the long streak where all the timber had been cut out and a big scoop with roots standing up in the air and a big slide of rocks down to the water. It was still raining a mite and the ground was sloshy and squanchy underfoot. Kate scrunched her hooves and got real balky, not liking it a bit. When we got to the top of the pasture she started to whine and whicker and stamp, and no matter how loud I whoaed she kept on a stamping, and I was plumb scared she'd pitch me off in the mud. Then I started to smell a funny smell like something burning. Now, don't ask me how anything could burn in all that water, because I don't know. When we came up on the rise, I saw the contraption. Reverend, it was the most tarnal crazy contraption I ever saw in my life. It was bigger nor my cowshed, and it was long and thin and as shiny as Marthy's old pewter pitcher her ma brought from England. It had a pair of red rods sticking out behind and a crazy globe fitted up where the top ought to be. It was stuck in the mud, turned halfway over on the little slide of roots and rocks, and I could see what had happened all right. The thing must have been, now, Reverend, you can say what you like, but that thing must have flew across Shattuck and landed on the slope in the trees and turned over and slid down the hill. That must have been the crash we heard. The rods weren't just red, they were red hot. I could hear them sizzle as the rain hit 'em. In the middle of the infernal contraption there was a door, and it hung all together as if every hinge on it had been wrenched halfway off. As I pushed old Kate alongside it, I heard somebody hollering alongside the contraption. I didn't know how to get the words, but it must have been for help, because I looked down and there was a man a-flopping along in the water. He was a big fella, and he wasn't swimming, just thrashing and hollering, so I pulled off my coat and boots and hove in after him. The stream was running fast, but he was near the edge, and I managed to catch on to an old tree root and hang on, keeping his head out of the water till I got my feet aground. Then I hauled him onto the bank. Up above me, Kate was still whinnying and raising Ned, and I shouted at her as I bent over the man. Well, Reverend, he sure did give me a surprise. Weren't no proper man I'd ever seed before. He was wearing some kind of red clothes, real shiny and sort of stretchy and not wet from the water like you'd expect, but dry, and it felt like that silk and India rubber stuff mixed together. And it was such a bright red that at first I didn't see the blood on it. When I did, I knew he were a goner. His chest were all stove in, smashed to pieces. One of the old tree roots must have jabbed him as the current flung him down. I thought he were dead already, but then he opened up his eyes. A funny color they were, greeny yellow, and I swear, Reverend, when he opened them eyes, I felt he was reading my mind. I thought maybe he might be one of them circus fellers in their flying contraptions that hang at the bottom of a balloon. He spoke to me in English, kind of choky and stiff, not like Joe the Portuguese sailor like those tarnal dumb Frenchies up Canady way, but, well, funny. He said, "My baby, in ship, get baby." He tried to say more, but his eyes went shut and he moaned hard. I yelped, "God Almighty!" Excuse me, Reverend, but I was so blame upset. That's just what I did say. "God Almighty, man, you mean there's a baby in that there dingful contraption?" He just moaned, so after spreading my coat around the man a little bit, I just plunged in that there river again. Reverend, I heard tell once about some tomfool idiot going over Niagara in a barrel, and I tell you it was like that when I tried crossing that freshet to reach the contraption. I went under and down and was whacked by floating sticks and whirled around in the freshet, but somehow, I don't know how, except by the pure grace of God, I got across that raging torrent and clumb up to where the crazy dingfol machine was sitting. Ship, he called it. But that were no ship, Reverend. It was some flying dragon kind of thing. It was a real scary looking thing, but I clumb up to the little door and hauled myself inside it, and, sure enough, there was other people in the cabin, only they was all dead. There was a lady and a man